Hey, happy Friday, everybody. Excuse me there for a second. I got to get my Friday going on. I'm Jason Odell, and my Substack is The Photographer's Perspective. It is good to be here. That means it's Friday. That means we made it to the end of another week. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can actually see what I'm doing. Hey, that's better. Hey, everyone. Hey, folks in the chat. It's good to see you there. Um, just wanted to go live a little bit and talk about some of the news of the week, both things that recap what I've been doing this week, but also some photo news that I've uh, compiled from around the various corners of the internet. Today is what is it today? Friday, February 6th. We're well into the second month of 2026, and I hope everyone is hanging in there. Um, Fortunately, winter has not been too bad here in Colorado this year. By that I mean it's actually downright pleasant. So after this gets done, I think I'm going to go take a walk outside. So let me jump over to my screen and start sharing uh, this news of this week. Okay, let me do this again. Of course, it decided to not refresh my screen. Here we go. I'll talk about those Canon lenses in a minute, but let's talk about our photography week in review. Okay, so here we go. All right, this week there's been a bunch of different things going on, and so I'm going to start. I put a little uh, multimedia thing together here, so let's talk about that. I'll start with my weekly wrap up. Yay, okay. I don't have any cool theme music or anything for this, so you're just going to have to imagine something exciting playing in the background. What did I do this week? Well, if you subscribe to my newsletter, and if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button because I appreciate all the subscribers. You can get my weekly updates into your email box. I'm trying to reduce the amount of email traffic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish things during the week, but I will send out an email at the end of the week with a recap of everything. So if you're not following along here on Substack every day, I know people have lives they have to get to. You'll get a recap in your inbox with what's new this week. So starting with big announcement for me this week is that I started doing online classes and I'm streaming them live to Substack. In the past, this was invitation only stuff. And so what I'm doing is my online classes, these are technical classes, not just webinars, although I have those too. Online classes. My first class was this past Sunday on the fundamentals of macro photography, close-up photography, and I appreciate all of you who tuned in. So what I'm doing is I've decided that I'm going to stream them for free live on Substack. My paid subscribers can watch them replay and get the archive of all the classes as I roll them out. I'm going to have more. We had some suggestions from the people who attended this week. And if you upgrade your subscription to the Photo Enthusiast tier, which is my founding member level, I will invite you to the Zoom link so you can be in the Zoom. You get a higher quality screen share. You can ask me questions in the Zoom chat live while we simultaneously stream this over to the Substack platform. So if you are a subscriber and online classes are your thing, consider maybe, bumping up to a paid subscription. It's about $10 a month, less than that if you I think it's about $8 a month if you get a year subscription. So just a thing to think about. But I am moving my entire online class platform catalog over to Substack, and it would be great if you guys can join me. I also posted an article this week on the dehaze slider. So let's take a look at that. Here we go. The simple contrast tool that makes my photos pop. And it turns out that even though the dehaze slider, which is a Lightroom Photoshop thing, actually it just came to Photoshop. Believe it or not, they just added clarity and dehaze to Adobe Photoshop as an adjustment layer in the most recent update just this past week. So a thing to think about. Anyway, when you go through, you can read this article and I talk about it, but the contrast slider for me is becoming more of a fine tuning tool. I find that using the dehaze slider gives an immediate pop, and it does an amazing job of bringing back highlights in sky. So even if you just use dehaze locally on a sky, it's an awesome tool. So you can read that article there if you're interested, and read about what I thought about the dehaze slider and why I'm using it and how I'm using it, including on that photograph right there. Okay. I've also rolled out my photography. I don't want to call it a podcast, but it's be recurring show. Sometimes it'll be with me, and sometimes I will have guests joining me. The frequency of that is still under some debate as I figure out what times people are actually free to join live streams here on Substack. But I did post an episode of my new show called Let's Click, and if you joined in this week, it was all about tripods. Talked about tripods, tripod heads, all various attachments. Some of these are still sitting here behind me. So you can go to the section now on the photographer's perspective, click the Let's Click tab, and you will see all those. And they're free. They're open to everybody. So you can just watch those. They're like mini webinars and hopefully interviews with guest photographers. All right, let's cut over to some photo news for this week. There's not a tremendous amount of stuff going on. The frequency of camera and lens updates has really started to plateau as manufacturers, the digital camera market is fairly mature at this point. Back in the early 2000s, we could be talking about a new camera almost every month. Now it's every couple of years for a particular brand. But there are some new announcements from some manufacturers. I just wanted to bring your attention to them in case you didn't know. Now, the first one is for Canon shooters, and these are the new lenses from Canon. They announced two lenses last night, an RF 14 millimeter 1.4 VCM, that stands for voice coil motor, and a 7 to 14 millimeter f2.8 to 3.5. So these are interesting lenses, and I want to bring those up. I had them somewhere. Here we go. All right. So these are the new lenses. Thanks to B&H for being a show sponsor. But if you go over to B&H, you can read about them. But these are two super wide angle lenses designed for full frame cameras. Okay. So the first one, this RF 14 millimeter f1.4 L. L is Canon's top end distinction for their glass. The L glass is their best glass, so to speak. And it's quite interesting here. It's got a rear filter, because if you look at this lens, it's got a built-in hood. You can't put front filters on it, so Canon has a rear filter mount. Now this is a very expensive lens. We can go back up here. You can look at the price tag of this thing. It's $2,600. That is absolutely not inexpensive. So who is this lens for? Let's think about this for a second. What are you going to use this for? Well, 14 millimeters on full frame is very, very wide. It's going to push everything back. So this lens has been redesigned or designed to have very quiet autofocus, what's called voice coil motor. So if you're using this and shooting video, which a lot of people like to use mirrorless cameras to do, shoot professional video, it's not going to make noise when it focuses that's going to get picked up by any microphone. So that's a nice benefit. The other thing, of course, is that it's got a very fast aperture, f1.4. So if you're a Canon mirrorless shooter, this is Canon RF mount, and you wanted a lens to go out and shoot the Milky Way, for example, night sky stuff, this could be your new best friend. Like I said, it's very expensive, $2,600, but a fast, wide prime lens is just it's the lens of choice, I should say, for any kind of astrophotography application. It's got some other features, again, more like for the video applications. It's got a manual aperture ring. Some people like using aperture rings to focus, or not to focus, but to adjust the aperture right there on the lens barrel, which is useful for the videographers. They can do that, and you can have it where it clicks, or you can have it where it doesn't click. So just depends on your needs there. So that's a very niche lens. It's a super wide lens, 14 millimeters. Again, that's really, really wide. So I could see photojournalists potentially using it, indoors. Creatives, that 1.4 maximum aperture, that f1.4, means that you're going to get some shallower depth of field than you would with a normal wide angle lens. Wide angle lenses, the depth of field is pretty great most of the time. So you really need a fast lens, 2.8, f2, 1.4 even, to get some bokeh in a wide angle shot. So I could see some potential creative uses for a lens like this, where if you were really close to somebody and you had the interesting background and it would all blur out like you would get with maybe a portrait lens. Certainly not to that extent, but this might get you there. Now going back, let's take a look at this other lens. This is this 7-14, and if you look at it, the first thing you probably notice is this very large and bulbous front element. This is a fisheye zoom. Okay, so it's a fisheye lens, and you might ask, well, why would you want a fisheye zoom? Well, Nikon had one of these several years ago, and I looked it up. It's been discontinued, actually. That was kind of interesting. I couldn't find it on their website anywhere. I think it was an 8 to 14 or something like that, fisheye zoom. And I borrowed one once and I tried it. And these are essentially two lenses. They have the other markings on the zoom. You can zoom between 7 and 14. But what happens is, at the widest end, okay, you're going to get extremely distorted circular fisheye. Okay, so at a 7 millimeters on a full frame camera, you're getting a disc. The corners of your image are going to be black. All right, so that's a circular fisheye. And I think the angle of view, it says 190-degree angle of view. So that's really wide. That's like getting your feet in your tripod in the shot. If you zoom it to the in-between lengths, it's just kind of strange because it's going to get bigger and bigger, but you're still going to have a little bit of those black corners in the frame. And I found that to be really impractical when I was trying the Nikon version of this lens. Again, this was probably 8 or 9 years ago now that one came out. So you've got the 14 millimeter end, and at that end the lens becomes a rectilinear fisheye. So it's not the circular curve. So it's 180 degrees, I think, 180-degree angle of view, very wide still a fisheye lens, but it's corrected to be rectangular. So really this is two lenses. You use this either as a circular fisheye at the 7 millimeter range, or you zoom it to 14 and you use it as a 14 millimeter full frame rectilinear fisheye lens. So even though you have all those other focal lengths in between, I found them to be completely far less useful. So what else is going on? And that's the announcement from Canon. We've got some other announcements. So Fujifilm, they just announced a firmware update for 2 of their 500 millimeter lenses. So these are big super telephoto lenses. Now that the same lens, they look different. They're essentially the same lens, just in different lens mounts. So the first lens is the XF version, the 500 millimeter 5.6, and that's the one that works on the Fuji X mount cameras. So think the Fuji X XT series, the Fuji X-H series, the APS-C Fuji cameras. Okay. The other one is for their GF medium format cameras. So yeah, I don't remember the crop factor for the GF format cameras. I think it's like the crop factor is 0.8 or something like that, 0.7, something like. So this is larger than 35 millimeter full frame. So the 500 millimeter lens on the APS-C body is the equivalent of having like a 750 millimeter lens, 1.5x, whereas the 500 millimeter on the Fuji medium format is probably somewhere in the 3 or 400 millimeter range. Okay, someone can look it up. And so this is a firmware update that is supposed to address uh, image stabilization issues. So I see in the chat, Stacy's asking about the best camera to get for a beginner. I actually wrote an article about that a while back. So I'll have to, if you go back through my archives, I believe I talked about in my holiday buying guide. The real question for beginners, really, Stacy, comes down to this, which is how serious is this person for learning real photography? Are they ready to move past their smartphone and they want some control over the exposure? If that's the case, there's some good options, and I believe I talked about them. I'll go back and try to dig that up for you. Okay, what else is coming up? Oh, so just the other day, it been reported that CIPA released, this is a camera sales tracking uh, 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 agency. They put out their data on 2025 camera sales. And it turns out that, not to any surprise of mine, that mirrorless cameras are indeed continuing to outsell DSLRs. So DSLRs, cameras that have a mirror, interchangeable lens. Mirrorless cameras don't have a mirror. And I've talked about those in the past in some of my articles about the practical benefits of each. This is not surprising. Most of the manufacturers, they're not even attempting to market their DSLRs that much, other than really entry-level, low cost cameras. So they do have that going for them. All the R&D from the big names, Sony, Canon, Nikon, they're all going into mirrorless camera and lens development. So it really is a mirrorless world at this point if you're serious about photography. But the other interesting data point they had in their article was that the small format cameras, so things that are smaller than full frame, so think APS-C, Micro Four Thirds, they're outselling full frame cameras. They sold about 75% more units of smaller format cameras than full frame. Now that's not entirely surprising, okay? Because the first thing is most of the APS-C and the smaller format cameras are simply less expensive. The entry-level models tend to be sensors that are APS-C format, 4/3 format. So that's not surprising at all. And of course, as I've talked about in the past, there are some nice advantages of smaller format cameras. Namely, they're smaller and lighter, and they can do a lot of fun things with them. You don't need a big camera to get the kind of quality that you may have wanted 15 years ago, where a full frame made a huge difference in image quality. So that's just some news that's coming up. Or that's come out this week. Let me talk a little bit, and we'll close with my photo of the week, which went out in my Friday postcard. So this was my photo from the Friday postcard. If you subscribe, you got this hopefully sent to you, either notified in the Substack app or in your email this morning, along with some links to my articles. So this image I titled Peach State Plate. This is a Georgia license plate. Looks like it is from 1970 on the back of a very old Ford V8. Rusting, covered with moss and algae, and it's sitting somewhere in Georgia. So let me talk a little bit about this picture. This is the final what shall I call it? The processed version of the image. So let me just go behind the scenes a little bit with this picture, just to share a little info for you, just because why not? So I'm going to open my Lightroom catalog, and let's go in on the map to where I took this picture. So here's Atlanta, Georgia, and there is a little town called Cartersville, and north of Cartersville is the little town, very small town of White, Georgia, and there is the place called Old Car City, USA. And it's a really amazing place. I've done workshops there in the past, and it's 40 acres of rusted cars dating back to the 30s. And it includes car makes that are models that are no longer even in production, Packards and Hudsons, lots of old Cadillacs. It's amazing. Now the cars are all derelict. They've been rusting out in a field in Georgia in a pine forest for the last 70 years or so. So uh, it's not a place where you can really go get that wide shot of the rusty old truck in a field. But it's an amazing place for close-up photography, and why I've done workshops there, I've done close-up workshops. So macro, quasi macro. So here's the image that I started with. I actually started with two images. This is the first one. Um, I sometimes will use more than two images, but this one I only needed two. So it's a real simple example. So this first image, if you look at it closely, you'll notice that the handle here is in focus, but the background is not. The license plate is just sort of in focus. So I took a second picture that was focused more on the background. Now you can see the handle has gone out of focus, but the name badges here are in focus. And what I did was I combined them using a program called Helicon Focus, something I talked about in my close-up workshop. I combined them into a single image. And what this program does is it finds the sharpest parts of each photo and blends them together. It hides the blurry parts and only shows you the sharp in focus areas. And the result came back as this image, and it came back in DNG raw format. So this is the stacked image where everything is in focus more or less, all from front to back. I took that image into Photoshop after I adjusted it in Lightroom, and I used a couple of my favorite filters. I used the Nick 8 color effects plugin from DxO. I added color, contrast, and that gave me the final image. Now, what I like about this photo was the light and shadow, how it kind of creates this spotlight almost on the license plate and on that latch. This was a trunk from an old car, old Ford. The shadow and light played in. Now, it doesn't look like that much in the as shot photo, and that's because when I bring them in, I set them to a very low contrast setting for further processing. So this was the before, and here's the after. And if we just want to do a side by side, why not? We can. There's our side by side before and after comparison. So what I chose to do was process the image in a way to accentuate those textures, and then I really diminished those shadow areas to bring focus and attention to the license plate and especially that latch on there. Okay, well, that is what I have for this week. I hope that everyone is out. If you're a photographer or a photo enthusiast, there's no better place to be than behind your camera, even if it's just walking around your neighborhood. So with all the things that we have going on in the world to distract us, pick up your camera, take it out. I do want to have a programming note. It went out a few days ago, but I'm going to be joined live tomorrow at what time, I believe? 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm in the mountain time zone. Nobody knows where we live. 1 p.m. Eastern, 11 Pacific, 10 Pacific, 1 Eastern. I'm going to be joined by my first guest for Let's Click, and that's Josh Weinberg. Josh is a photographer in the San Francisco Bay Area. He came with me on my Chicago workshop, and he's going to be talking about his projects lately, two of which, one is making zines, and we'll talk about what those are. And the other project that he's got going on right now is doing some car photography, automobiles as his preferred subject. So it should be fun. It'll be a casual chat, non-technical, or at least very minimal technical, I hope. And I hope you all can join us tomorrow. Until next time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button up there if you haven't already subscribed, and like this in the chat if you've liked what you've had today. And oh, I see Josh is even in the chat. Hey, Josh, good to see you. So yeah, get behind your camera, tune out the news, and I will see you tomorrow for Let's Click. Thanks, everyone. Take care.